समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉप अप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या? समझ में नहीं आया।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
अब समझा।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
Almost everyone in the world is thinking, what is Trump thinking? What is Trump doing? Trump, 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 Trump. That makes him a sort of colossal figure on the world stage.
Do you think President Trump is going to come for the Quad Summit later? The mistrust has frankly never been higher in the last 20 years as it now. From your perspective, how do we best understand rhetoric versus signal versus substance?
Well, I think the first thing to understand about President Trump is that drama is the key to his method. His political method.
We do not need to react to every damn thing he says, but still he's the president of the United States. So how does this fit in America's grand strategy?
When Trump looks at the world, he thinks of the kind of ally he wishes America had more of would be a country like Israel.
How has Pakistan been able to exploit its weak hand, so well with the Trump administration?
Both in the first term and now, the Trump administration thinks in terms of who can we flip.
President of United States removing the waivers that India had in the Chabahar port in Iran, and also supplying Pakistan with the air-to-air missiles now. It does, sort of strike somewhere deeper.
From India's point of view, how wonderful that the person who is going to be advising President Trump on the whole region is going to be spending 95% of his time in India. Pakistan, which was doing nothing for years, has suddenly upped its game.
What are your views on Indian purchases of Russian oil that India does in its own strategic autonomy and expects its partners to respect?
I could say that levering tariffs on people is America's sovereign thing and others should respect. India wants to be non-aligned, but it wants everyone else to align with India. Getting some definition on the trade issue is key.
Hi. What a pleasure. Swasti.
Thank you, Swasti. Well, I'm doing all right.
Okay.
Busy day.
I can totally see. Please come.
All right, thank you. So you'll have America, I'll have
Yes.
Eurasia.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And do I look at the camera? Do I look at you?
I'm very happy to finally see you in person.
That worked out, yes.
Welcome to the WorldView with Swasti, and today I'm extremely pleased to be speaking to a phenomenal strategic expert, one of America's best-known strategic minds, Professor Walter Russell Mead, and he is donning many hats. He's the Alexander Hamilton Professor of Strategy and Statecraft at the University of Florida. He's also taught U.S. foreign policy at Yale. He's a scholar at the Hudson Institute, and he's also a columnist for the Wall Street Journal. So, Professor Mead, welcome to the WorldView with Swasti for ThePrint, and you're a huge supporter of U.S.-India bilateral relations. You were recently, you've been on a trip to India, and yesterday you met Prime Minister Modi along with the delegation that comprised of, business reps and media representatives, etc. So how has the meeting been, and what brings you to India?
Well, I come to India anytime I can. I love being here. The people, the food, the sort of level of conversation, it's all terrific. This particular time, because of the difficulties in the bilateral relationship, I wanted to come, and a number of my friends and associates wanted to come to sort of show, to listen to people here and try to understand exactly what India is seeing and feeling at this moment. But then to begin real conversations about where do we go from here? How do we keep this relationship on track? So, as for the meeting with the Prime Minister, I'm certainly not going to get into details, but the Honorable Prime Minister is, as he always is, on top of his brief, able to speak very clearly and concisely about his view of things, and over our visit, we've had the chance to meet with a number of people in the cabinet, and I've had, I think, a very comprehensive view of India's view of the current situation.
Right, that's very important because not all is going well in the US-India strategic ties. And I think the mistrust, if you talk about the common people, the strategic circles by and large, the mistrust has frankly never been higher in the last 20 years as it now. So, you are obviously a veteran when it comes to understanding, teaching, and sort of explaining the US foreign policy and also Trump. Now, let's just start with Donald Trump's style, President Trump's style. Now, what I see there are three elements. There is rhetoric, there is signal, and there is substance. So let's just understand that from you. How far should we go to deconstruct, his statements, which are extremely volatile, which are also undermining sort of India's place in the world, as you know, and we keep talking about that. But from your perspective, how do we best understand rhetoric versus signal versus substance?
Well, I think the first thing to understand about President Trump is that drama is the key to his method, his political method. I believe he has formed the view that being the center of attention and dominating the moment, dominating the news cycle, is what makes him, first, as popular as he's been in the United States, able to win elections, able to overawe his opponents. And then on the international scene, the fact that almost everyone in the world is thinking, what is Trump thinking? What is Trump doing?
Yeah.
Trump, 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 Trump. That makes him a sort of colossal figure on the world stage. So when something comes up where someone like me, who's a think tanker, an analyst, oh, how boring, and a professor, all of these useless things, I think about, okay, what are the policy outcomes and how would you develop a strategy to get there? That's not the first thing Trump thinks about. He thinks about, in the moment, how do we make this an episode of the greatest reality television show in the history of the world, the Donald Trump Show.
Okay. So then how do these play out in terms of his grand strategy? Because he seems to have some grand strategy, right? I mean, tariffs have become a centerpiece of his strategy. I mean, for all his first-term love for Indo-Pacific and converging with India, now you suddenly see that even the likes of Elbridge Colby are now talking more and more about the Western Hemisphere, etc. So how does this sort of play out? Because there's one thing, the drama part, of course, we understand that well in India, that we do not need to react to every damn thing he says, but still, he's the president of the United States. So how does this fit in America's grand strategy? And is he undermining America's own national interests?
Well, obviously, you would find a lot of people in the United States who would agree that he is. That's what a political debate is all about. But I think if I were to try to interpret the patterns that we see in Trump's diplomacy, certainly, as you say, tariffs are one of them. It's in some ways, I think his worldview was formed in the 1970s and 80s when the trade deficit was dominating American news. And to some degree, it was the trade deficit that forced the end of the gold standard and the collapse of the Bretton Woods system as early as the Nixon administration. So these things are very much on his mind. But I would say overall, when Trump looks at the world, he thinks of the kind of ally he wishes America had more of would be a country like Israel, which is not to say that he agrees with everything that Israel does, but Israel cares more about, say, maintaining stability in the Middle East, keeping Iran, defeating Iran, than the United States does. It's something the United States would like and thinks is important, but for Israel, it's a question of life and death. And so he knows that he can rely on Israel to really be a vigilant protector of the regional order, and America can stand back a bit. But then he goes to Europe and he sees the Europeans don't want to spend money on defense, and they want America to pay for their defense and America to take care of Russia for them. But also, so on the one hand, that means they get to spend money instead of on defense on social welfare or whatever else they'd like to spend it on. But it also means because they feel protected by America, they can make lots of great commercial deals with Russia. So he thinks, look, if Russia is a danger in the world, it's much more of a danger to Germany than it is to the United States. So why are we caring more about Germany's security than Germany is?
Yeah.
Let them do the job.
Yeah.
Now, I think he brings some of this thinking to the Pacific as well.
Okay.
So there's Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, and a number of other countries. I think India's in a somewhat different position because it's a little farther away from the main thrust of Chinese expansion, but India certainly has its concerns about China. And so Trump would like to see Asian allies and friends taking a larger role, which would then allow the United States to step back, but also means we don't have to be the bad cop all the time.
Okay.
So I think in some ways he's almost going on strike a little bit to say to these allies, look, if you actually care about these things, then you need to do more. We'll help, but we want to be the backstop, not the front line.
So how does that, what would that mean in the case of, let's say, US-India relationship? What is it that he would want India to do more when you're talking about, especially the security part?
Well, I don't want to speak for him because I'm not sure he even has sort of in his mind a clear idea of what he would like India to do. But one thought I certainly have is, I think especially now that Japan has a new prime minister, or is about to have once the LDP,
the woman, the first woman prime minister.
Takaichi, right?
Yeah, Sanae Takaichi.
Who is kind of a little bit in the mold of Shinzo Abe, with whom Trump had a terrific relationship, and who Trump really saw as someone who got it. Closer ties between economic, defense, intelligence, and others between India and Japan would be the kind of thing that from Trump's point of view would be helping America. It would be a plus for the United States, but very much a plus for these countries too.
Okay.
So I think, part of it is the Quad, but within the Quad, the Japan-India connection corridor, so to speak. And I know when I've talked to people in India, they'd like to see more investment from Japan, closer commercial relations. And so things like those are the kinds of things that would begin to give an impression in Washington that in the Indo-Pacific, the United States is not the only country taking security seriously.
Right. And I just have to speak to you and ask you about Trump's surprising turn on Pakistan, which has been really the most, fascinating and worrying thing to study, because in recent months what we've seen is that particularly starting from June, just as the June 17th phone call between Prime Minister Modi and President Trump perhaps didn't go so well, but after that we saw that there was a lunch meeting between President Trump and Field Marshal Munir, and then just a few months later in September, both the Prime Minister and the Field Marshal of Pakistan were again in DC. Islamabad enjoys the lowest tariffs compared to India, that is still struck with 50% tariffs, 25% original and 25% for Russian oil purchases. Recently, US elevated, the BLA, the Balochistan Liberation Army status to a full foreign terrorist organization, which was not the case earlier. The US-Pakistan long dormant, counter-terrorism program is now sort of renovated. And all of this is coming at a time when we see that Pakistan is also enjoying a kind of a diplomatic sweet spot after Operation Sindoor. How has Pakistan been able to exploit its weak hand, so well with the Trump administration?
Well, I think we should say it's not just with the Trump administration. We look at the Pakistan-Saudi Defense Pact and close relations between the Pakistani and Turkish military.
Yeah.
We do, I think for a number of years, everyone, and to some degree this includes India, has been writing Pakistan off as yesterday's news, right? The country has been consumed by internal disputes which are far from settled. It has been under strict, very difficult budgetary, economic conditions. And Pakistan, and India was making kind of move on, the integration of Kashmir and Jammu into the sort of regular status. India was making great strides. There's a Hindu temple in the Emirates. So India was competing successfully with Pakistan in the Gulf, and clearly also India had replaced Pakistan as the closest American friend in this part of the world.
Yes.
Right? So Pakistan was losing, and almost not responding at all. But what it looks as if has happened is that in 2025, the Pakistanis have decided, well, this can't go on. And they've mounted a whole, we can think about activities in Kashmir. We can think about diplomatic outreach to the Gulf. We can think about diplomatic outreach to the United States. And I think others were really caught off guard by this.
All right. Now, I ask you this question. Of course, you're right. I mean, I myself, through my work, have been arguing that, yes, we tend to sort of misread and underread how Pakistan has been able to sort of entrench itself as a revolving door between China, Caucasus, Turkey, Middle East, and the United States. But I ask you this question because Trump is a businessman. President Trump comes with that, lot of common sense that a businessman carries. India is a 4 trillion economy. Pakistan, by comparison, is not even 5 billion today.
Right.
The per capita today of India, even though it is not really good enough, but it's $2.5 thousand dollars. For Pakistan, it's not even $1,500. And yet, you see President Trump making these overtures when it comes to having a critical minerals deal, etc., crypto investments. I mean, clearly, do you see that? Is there the signal that he would want India to do more or to step up or to? But that's the $1 million question. What exactly is it?
See,
it is, yeah.
To me, it's a little bit ironic. I think what's happened is that Americans, and this includes Trump, no longer hyphenate India and Pakistan.
Okay.
That is to say, think that India policy and Pakistan policy are completely different policies. And so, but I think in the Indian mind, a certain degree of hyphenation still exists, that there's a zero-sum competition between India and Pakistan, and what the one gets, the other doesn't get. And Trump may have stumbled into a situation where he did not necessarily understand the consequences that a warming toward Pakistan would have for the U.S.-India relationship. He is probably thinking, and I'm guessing here, I'm speculating, in terms of China a bit. Think about what he's just done in the Caucasus. Right before the Alaska summit, he helped to engineer a peace agreement between Armenia and Azerbaijan,
yeah.
right? Which was a real poke to Putin with a stick, because these are in the former Soviet Union, but also it's about creating a pipeline that would end Russia's ability to block off Central Asian gas from the rest of the world, energy resources. So quite dramatic. Both in the first term and now, the Trump administration thinks in terms of who can we flip.
Okay.
Remember the approach to North Korea in the first Trump term.
Yeah. Also the Abraham Accords, the normalization.
Right. So what about, I could see in the Trump administration world, what if we took China's new best friend and brought it back onto on Team USA?
Okay.
How would that? And I'm sure that in Beijing, people did not wake up in the morning and say, oh, wonderful, Pakistan is thinking of selling rare earths to the United States at the moment when Beijing is trying to monopolize rare earths to leverage power in the international system. Pakistan wants the United States to have a port that it can use. We thought we were doing that with Guadalajara. We thought we had this big, elaborate plan to establish our sphere of influence there. My guess would be that this is the thinking that is going on in Washington. And I don't think they understood fully just what any move in the direction of Pakistan does, and how sort of deep wounds that were built up over many years can be sort of reopened by even what is really a relatively small, light touch at this point.
No, I also ask you this question, Professor Mead, because it's not just a diplomatic outreach or these futuristic plans. Like, for example, when you think about the situation from the perspective of President of United States removing the waivers that India had in the Chabahar port in Iran, and also supplying Pakistan with the air-to-air missiles now, it does, sort of strike somewhere deeper,
Yes.
right? It is not just about a diplomatic outreach and stuff. So the point that we need to sort of talk about here is that what exactly should be done to really, revamp this critical relationship of the 21st century? Because I have read a lot of your work, and I've also heard you speak many a time, earlier, that India should be the most ideal partner in the Indo-Pacific that the United States would want. Why is Donald Trump not able to see this then?
Again, I think President Trump doesn't get his strategy out of books. Out of it comes out of his experience and out of the moment.
Okay.
I think again, we should not underestimate the signal that Washington is also sending India. I believe just last night, Indian time, a new ambassador was confirmed for India. And this is one of Trump's closer associates who was, entrusted with filling the posts throughout the administration. So someone who clearly has deep trust with Trump. And so India is going to, I've heard people say for the first time since John Kenneth Galbraith in the early 1960s, India will have an ambassador who can call the president on the telephone. And some in India are saying, well, this is very annoying because he's also been given this coordination of South Asian diplomacy. Are we back to hyphenization? Is this a problem? I would say, again, from India's point of view, how wonderful that the person who is going to be advising President Trump on the whole region is going to be spending 95% of his time in India.
Right.
So I would say here is a terrific opportunity to make India's case to someone who is extremely close to President Trump. And that would be, I think, if I were in India, if I were an Indian diplomat, I would be trying to figure out, so what are Mr. Gore's favorite foods, and how do I, what football team does he follow? And, just generally figure out how to create a welcoming atmosphere. And begin to, Pakistan, which was doing nothing for years, has suddenly upped its game and has appeared on many different fronts where it was absent before. All right, India is bigger than Pakistan. India has much bigger concerns even than Pakistan. But India is not going to just let Pakistan exploit the space. So India needs to develop the same kind of more intense and focused diplomacy that Pakistan has done. I think there are many things about Pakistan's role in the Middle East that will be of concern to people in the United States. There's certainly the record of Pakistani complicity in nuclear proliferation. And whether we think about Iran or even other Middle Eastern countries, the potential for nuclear proliferation in the Middle East is getting higher. And that would lead to, and I think it's a rather irresistible tension for Pakistan. We also need to think about the degree to which Pakistan and China are acting together. Is this outreach to the United States, Pakistan trying to get away from China? Or is this actually something that China is encouraging to try to drive a wedge between the United States and India? So this is the kind of thing that we're all just going to have to pay close attention to, evaluate, and develop counter strategies.
All right. Now, quick question on the question of Russian oil imports, because
Mm-hmm.
that again, so until about the 2nd of April, it was just 25% tariffs. And then after the June 17 phone call with Prime Minister Modi, lo behold, we had another 25%. percent What is your view on how should that be looked upon? Because India's position has on that has been clear. It is that India is going to buy oil from wherever it gets the cheapest oil.
Mm-hmm.
But in the larger sort of equation of where the war in Ukraine is going, where, I mean, how Prime Minister, Modi has always called for a cessation of violence, etc. But, recently we've also seen that President Trump has kind of recalibrated his position on the war per se and on Russia, etc., etc. So in this entire scenario, what are your views on Indian purchases of Russian oil that India does in its own strategic autonomy and expects its partners to respect?
Well, on the other hand, I could say that levering tariffs on people is America's sovereign thing, and others should respect it.
Yes.
Okay, India wants to be non-aligned, but it wants everyone else to align with India in a sense, while India retains freedom of action. Naturally, every country likes this. I, there are a lot of things I personally. This is not a policy if I were in charge of things, and let us all thank God that I'm not.
Okay.
But if I were in charge of things, I would not have gone down that road myself.
Okay.
I think that for President Trump, he was, again, just as on his Pakistan policy, he wasn't really thinking about India. I think on this was more about a signal to Russia
Okay.
than a signal to India. India is sort of caught in a crossfire here. That Trump is trying to do two things. First, at the bottom, Trump's view of Russia and India's view of Russia are actually much closer
Yes.
than most people realize. He really doesn't want Russia to be closely aligned with China.
Same
For
as
India,
India.
this is a nightmare,
Yeah.
right? And the fact that Russia may be choosing China over India is a deep concern in this country, as it should be. And Trump would like to pull away. He had hoped that having a warm relationship with Putin and clearly offering what a reasonable Russian leader might think was a good compromise on Ukraine would be enough to end the war, normalize economic relationships with Russia, and begin the process of trying to get Russia to realize that actually China is a future problem for Russia of great importance. That has been blocked. Essentially, Putin is choosing China over the United States, as well as choosing it over India.
Yeah.
He's
Because for him, winning the war in Ukraine is perhaps the only strategy that can make him survive right now.
well.
He has to.
I think Zbigniew Brzezinski, I think, once said that with Ukraine, Russia is an empire. Without it, it is a much smaller force.
Yeah. Okay.
And I think Putin believes this. So here we are. Trump, I think, shifted from trying to win Putin over with flowers and candy to trying to make threats, but the threats were not yet. But he doesn't want to be trapped into rescuing Europe again by the Europeans sit back and do very little, and now the Americans take all the risks and pay the money. So threatening the Russians with tighter economic sanctions, but not actually putting them on, for Trump was part of this. And so the tariff on India because of the oil seemed, I think, in Trump's mind, like a good way to show I'm serious. India is not an inconsiderable country. Putin, look at where I'm going. But then he's also said to the Europeans, I want tariffs on China, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So he's, and here again, I think India was just caught in a crossfire because, for one thing, the National Security Council, which is normally the organization in the American government that tries to coordinate policies among the different bureaucracies and so on and give a overall direction, is much less influential in this administration than in the past. And so you don't have the the voices that are saying, wait, you've done this, you've done this, you've done this, all of which affect India much more deeply than you understood or wanted. So I'm not yet sure that Trump himself has a picture, a full picture of what's happened.
Right. But on that note, I have to ask you, so how do we repair the relationship? Because of course there's, we have a $212 billion worth of trade, the 5 million people of Indian origin living there. We get remittances from there, important partner for technology innovation, semiconductors, so on and
Right.
so forth. Both sides put together this relationship with a lot of hard work. How do we repair it? Of course, I think the lobbying efforts are going on there. I mean, I keep hearing about that, but please tell me what you think about it.
Well, look, I think getting some definition on the trade issue is key. Some clarity on the oil situation would be good. I think India has a very strong case on the oil question, and that's one to really work on. I think helping the administration understand the impact of its overtures to Pakistan on the U.S.-India relationship are also important, and that I brought a pretty significant delegation of Americans with me on this trip, and I'm sure many of them, when they get back home, will be sharing with their friends and acquaintances what they've learned here. This is all part of it. But I also think while this is happening and we work to end it, we need to take the lessons of this. I won't call it quite a crisis yet. We're not at that stage, but rough spot, very rough spot in the relationship. What are some of the lessons? Which strikes me as very consequential. So most people, amateurs in foreign policy, often assume that when two countries become more closely involved, they have fewer quarrels. In fact, this is not true.
Okay.
You quarrel much more with your wife or with your son than you do with a stranger who lives 50 miles away. You have nothing in common.
Interesting. Yeah.
So 30 years ago, U.S.-India trade was quite small.
Yeah.
There weren't many, we didn't have as many subjects to quarrel about. And if we're going to have this closer relationship, Indian decisions will affect the United States more, and American decisions will affect India more.
Yeah.
All right. What we need is the infrastructure in civil society.
Okay.
People who know both countries, people who understand. The president should be surrounded by people who understand that if you do X, India will really, really react.
Yeah.
And so don't do X.
Yeah.
Unless you want to make India react. Only offend them on purpose.
Right. Yeah.
So, and that is what our program at Hudson Institute has been focusing on, is trying to build the number of people. We have some journalists who've been traveling through India to get a kind of India 101 experience. Ultimately, we should see more university exchanges,
Yes.
more American students studying in India, more Americans learning to studying Indian languages.
Yeah.
The assumption that everyone speaks English is not a good one.
Yeah. No, I've heard your views on that. I mean, you've been promoting you've been encouraging Americans and young Americans to start learning Indian languages
Yes.
as well. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think I think the reality is that between communist China and jihadi terror, both of which target the United States and India,
Yeah.
and both of which endanger our ability to live the way we would like to live, the United States and India are going to be coming closer together.
All
And
right.
you think about tech, you think about the people, the Indian diaspora in the United States. We're going to get closer. That means we are going to quarrel more. So we need, just as, with your family members, you learn, oh, Aunt Betsy really hates it when I do this.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, if she's mad at me, if I do that, that's the way to get to make Aunt Betsy be happy.
Okay.
So we need to do this, and we need to work together.
All right. And just my last question to you, Professor Mead, and you've been so candid, in this discussion. Do you think President Trump is going to come for the Quad Summit later?
predicting President Trump is one of those things that I try to avoid doing.
All right.
But I think it would be an excellent idea for President Trump to come to the ASEAN, the East Asian Summit, the Quad Summit. I think all of us would like to see a bilateral meeting between President Trump and Prime Minister Modi, where they come out smiling and joking,
Yeah.
and it becomes clear to everyone that the clouds have parted.
All right. On that note, Professor Mead, thank you so much for your sustained interaction with our country, as a civilizational force in the world and also as an important strategic partner to the United States of America. That was Professor Walter Russell Mead, and you were watching Worldview with Swasti. Stay tuned for yet another episode.